Hey, it's Kurt at the Top Corner Hockey Studios, Top Corner Hockey on Facebook, Top Corner Kurt on Instagram. Thanks for watching. This is a new series on Top Corner Hockey called Defunct NHL Teams. Our first club we'll be looking at are the Montreal Wanderers. Although the Montreal Wanderers have only a small 4-game sample in the history of the NHL, their history before the National Hockey League is quite long and impressive. A charter member of the 1903 Federal Amateur Hockey League, the Wanderers were good from the get-go. In their first season, Montreal went 6-0 and battled the Ottawa Silver 7 in a 2-game total goal series for the Stanley Cup. Game 1 was played in Montreal and was tied at 5 after regulation. Montreal refused to play overtime because they were unhappy with the refereeing. Stanley Cup trustees ordered a new series. Both games would be played, though, in Ottawa. The Wanderers didn't like that plan and demanded the tie be played in Montreal. The series never happened and was abandoned. After both Ottawa and the Montreal Wanderers went 9-1 again, they met for the Stanley Cup in 1906. The Wanderers won Game 1 9-1 and the second 12-10 for their first Stanley Cup. The Montreal Wanderers would take on anyone that wanted to take away their trophy. The Wanderers met a lot of competition for it. 8 months after beating Ottawa, Montreal challenged New Glasgow, Nova Scotia to a Stanley Cup series. The Wanderers won both games easily to retain the cup. Just 2 months later, the Wanderers again had a Stanley Cup challenge, but this time they were defeated by the Kenora Thistles in a 2-game total goal series. For the next couple of months, the Wanderers beat everyone and had a 10-game winning streak before their Stanley Cup rematch with the small Northern Ontario town in March of 1907. The Wanderers won the first game, but the Thistles won the second. However, Montreal had scored more goals and got the Stanley Cup back. For the next year, the Montreal Wanderers beat teams from Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, and Edmonton to retain the cup. Finally, in 1909, Ottawa, now called the Senators, beat the Wanderers for the Stanley Cup. Somehow, despite all this success, attendance at the Wanderers games was pitiful. Along with Renfrew, the Wanderers created the new National Hockey Association on November 25, 1909. Going 11-1 in their first year in the NHA, the Wanderers won their 4th Stanley Cup in 5 years. However, players were moving west to play in the Pacific Coast Hockey League, and that was driving pay for players up. Montreal could not keep up, and many players left. When the NHL was formed in November of 1917, the Wanderers had not only lost players to other teams and leagues, but now many were involved in the military after the start of World War I. When the NHL opened their inaugural season on December 19, 1917, the Montreal Wanderers barely had enough men for a lineup. Somehow, though, they defeated Toronto 10-9 for their only official NHL win. The Wanderers would get crushed their next game. On January 2, 1918, fire burned down the Montreal Wanderers arena. The blaze began in the players' dressing room, but the cause of it has never been determined. With nowhere to play, the Wanderers had to forfeit their next 2 games. Hamilton offered to buy the team and move it, but Wanderers owners chose to withdraw. Instead, on January 4, 1918, the Montreal Wanderers were gone from hockey forever. There have been 54 team names used in the 100-year anniversary of the NHL. A lot of them have been thrown into the scrap heap, almost half, in fact, including the Montreal Wanderers. Did you learn anything from this episode? What are some things you remember about the Montreal Wanderers? Are you surprised to find out the NHL has lost so many teams over the 100-year history of the league? Please continue to like and subscribe. This is Kurt on Top Corner Hockey. Thanks for watching. See you next time.